July 15th, 2026. Two rooms, 12,000 kilometers apart. In a federal courtroom in Brooklyn, New York, the richest man in Asia files a sworn affidavit. Gautam Adani, net worth $89.2 billion, swearing to an American judge that nothing was promised, offered, sought, received, agreed to, or accepted in exchange for the United States government's own motion to dismiss his bribery indictment. A motion the judge has refused so far to simply approve. Adani denies any wrongdoing and denies any deal. In a protest square in Delhi called Jantar Mantar, a 60-year-old engineer is on day 18 of a hunger strike. His blood sugar reads 67. He has lost 8.5 kilograms. 5 years ago, India's defense secretary publicly thanked this man for building solar-heated shelters for the Indian Army, tents holding plus 15 degrees inside while it is minus 14 outside near the Chinese border. Last September, the same state declared him a threat to national security, flew him 1,000 kilometers to a desert jail, and held him for 170 days. It never charged him with anything. Same republic, same day. One man's companies recovered $150 billion of market value in 3 years. The other is starving in public for the 6th time. And here is the number that connects the two rooms. The top 1% of Indians now take 22.6% of the country's income, a larger share than they took under the British Empire. That is not a slogan. It is the finding of the World Inequality Lab, Thomas Piketty and colleagues, peer-reviewed this year, and they gave the era we are living in its name, the Billionaire Raj. So, who actually pays for India? Why does the richest man in Asia need to swear an oath in Brooklyn? And what exactly did the engineer do? By the end of this video, you'll see that all three questions have the same answer. First, be honest about what is real. India is legitimately the fastest growing major economy on Earth, 7.7% last fiscal year on the government's numbers. The IMF agrees on the label. UPI, its payment system, now carries roughly half of all real-time digital transactions on the planet, 129 billion of them in a year, 21 crore demat accounts, a $5 trillion stock market. This is not a failed state. That's what makes the rest of this video disturbing. Now flip the same telescope around. Divide that giant economy by its 1.4 billion people, and India ranks around 146th in the world, roughly $2,800 per person, the lowest in the G20. In April, the IMF projected India slipping from the celebrated 4th largest economy to 6th this year, behind Japan and the United Kingdom, after the rupee hit an all-time low of 96 to the dollar. And on income per person, the IMF projects Bangladesh edging past India again in 2026. Inside the country, the statisticians draw the last decade as a single letter, K. In 2024, India bought a record 51,500 luxury cars, while ordinary hatchbacks fell 14%. Two-wheelers, the vehicle of the aspiring poor, still sell fewer units than they did in 2019. Household financial savings touched their lowest level in roughly 47 years. Rural real wages barely moved for a decade through 10 years of 7% headline growth. And at the top of the K, India had 56 billionaires in 2014. Today, by Haroon's count, 284, holding roughly 98 lakh crore rupees. That is close to 1/3 of India's GDP, parked in 284 households. It is more than the entire GDP of Saudi Arabia. The richest 10,000 Indians out of 920 million adults average 2,069 times the income of the average Indian adult. Remember that number, 2,069. Growth this lopsided is not weather. It has an architecture, and the architecture has a date, September 20th, 2019. That afternoon, by ordinance, no parliamentary debate, India cut its corporate tax rate from 30% to 22%. The government's own answers to Parliament put the cost at 2.28 lakh crore rupees in just the first 2 years. For scale, that's roughly the entire annual health budget, twice over, handed back, mostly to the largest firms. Then watch what happened in the government's own receipts. In 2023, for the first time in the history of the Republic, salaried individuals paid more income tax than all of corporate India combined. By this fiscal year, the gap is 12.4 against 11 lakh crore.
Inside corporate tax, it gets stranger. The 877 companies that earn nearly 2/3 of all corporate profit in India pay the lowest effective rate, 18.85%, while the smallest profitable companies pay the highest. The empire's first rule in any century: the strong negotiate, the weak are billed. Now, zoom into your own kitchen, because this is where the balance was made up. Since 2014, excise duty on petrol rose about 194%, on diesel roughly 790. In 2022, a 5% GST landed on packaged flour, curd, and paneer. In 2024, the GST Council needed 3 separate tax slabs, 5, 12, and 18% for popcorn, depending on how it was flavored. And for 3 years, India charged 18% GST on health insurance premiums, collecting 24,000 crore rupees from people insuring themselves against ruin, until a leaked revolt letter from inside the cabinet and a public backlash killed it last September. Consumption taxes don't ask your income. A billionaire and a daily wager pay the same 5% on the same kilo of packaged atta.
Oxfam estimated, using older consumption data, that the bottom half of Indians carries nearly 2/3 of GST. Later studies on official 22-23 data put it closer to 30%.
Take the lower number. It is still a machine where money is collected flat from everyone and returned, in tax cuts and write-offs, disproportionately to the top.
And what happens to the very rich, structurally? India abolished its wealth tax in 2015. It has had no inheritance tax since 1985. Long-term capital gains, the way wealth actually grows, are taxed at a flat 12.5% against 30+ on a top salary. 3 tax slabs for popcorn, 0 for a dynasty.
Architecture needs financing. In 2017, India invented a financial instrument no democracy had ever tried at scale: the electoral bond. Anonymous, bearer-style political donations routed through a state-owned bank. The same law quietly removed the cap that had limited corporate donations to 7.5% of profits and let loss-making shell companies donate unlimited sums, in secret, by design. It ran for 6 years until February 15, 2024, when a 5-judge Supreme Court bench unanimously struck the scheme down as unconstitutional for violating the voters' right to know and noted its potential for quid pro quo. The court had to threaten the bank with contempt before the data came out. When it did, of roughly 12,000 crore in disclosed redemptions, the ruling BJP had received about 6,000, roughly half of everything across all parties in the disclosed window. Then, journalists lined up the dates. The Enforcement Directorate arrests a director of Aurobindo Pharma on November 10, 2022. 5 days later, the company buys 5 crore worth in electoral bonds. 6 days after that, the BJP encashes them. A construction giant buys 140 crore in bonds, about a month before it is formally awarded a 14,400 crore tunnel project. A telecom group's 100 crore purchase is encashed 8 days before its satellite venture wins a first-of-its-kind authorization.
At least 14 of the top 30 bond buyers had faced raids or probes by central or state agencies. The Hindu found 33 companies with 0 profits or losses, buying nearly 582 crore in bonds. About 3/4 went to the ruling party. Now, precision matters here, because precision is what makes this frightening. No Indian court has adjudicated a single one of these sequences as a bribe. The Supreme Court declined a special investigation in August 2024. The BJP denies wrongdoing. The companies did not respond to journalists' questions. What is on the record is only this: the chronology, the amounts, and a scheme a constitutional bench found unconstitutional. The receipts exist. The trial never happened. And one more ledger, the quiet one. Between 2014 and late 2024, Indian banks wrote off 16.61 lakh crore rupees in loans, recovering barely 16%. The Reserve Bank correctly notes a write-off is an accounting entry, not forgiveness. But hold it next to this. In 2017, the chair of the State Bank of India warned that waiving farm loans would damage, quote, credit discipline. In 2019, India privatized 6 airports at once. The Finance Ministry and Niti Aayog objected on record to aspects of the process. The requirement of prior airport experience was dropped. A group with 0 airports won all 6. Kerala's own state agency told its high court the tender was, quote, arbitrary, unreasonable, and in violation of all principles of fairness and natural justice. Today, that group is India's largest private port operator too, moving about 28% of the nation's cargo. In telecom, Jio launched in 2016 with roughly 7 months of free data, 100 million subscribers in 6 months, and then a Supreme Court judgment on retroactive dues landed more than 1.4 lakh crore rupees of liability on its older rivals. In coal, a 2022 auction had exactly one bidder. It won. Raghuram Rajan, the former central bank governor, calls the subsidy model a, quote, chosen few policy. His co-author names the few: Tata, Ambani, Adani. An analyst at the Cato Institute calls Adani the state's national champion. The government rejects the characterization. The market doesn't. Through indictment and short seller crisis, the group's stocks fully recovered, and in June, Gautam Adani became Asia's richest man again. Which brings us back to Brooklyn. A U.S. indictment alleging a $265 million bribery scheme. A clean chit at home from SEBI. Then, this May, the U.S. Justice Department itself moved to dismiss the case, citing, among other things, the administration's new enforcement priorities. The judge refused to rubber stamp it, called the government's reasons terse, bland, and conclusory, and made Adani swear under oath there was no deal. He swore it. The dismissal was still pending when this video was made. Every institution has now spoken, except one. No court anywhere has ruled on the merits. The richest man in Asia sits exactly where the electoral bond chronologies sit: documented, denied, and never tried. Indians have a name for what their country was before all this, before the First Empire: Sone ki Chidiya, the golden bird. And in 1867, a Bombay mathematician named Dadabhai Naoroji sat down with the empire's own budgets and proved, number by number, where the gold went. He called it the drain. Not theft at gunpoint, a system. Taxes collected from Indian farmers regardless of harvest, spent on an administration that answered to London, securing monopolies for chartered companies, enforced by laws that could jail a man without trial. The Rowlatt Act, 1919. Detention without charge. When Gandhi wanted to fight it, his weapon was his own body. He fasted. Now lay the two systems side by side. Land revenue collected regardless of harvest. A 5% GST on packaged flour collected regardless of income. Chartered monopolies with the Crown's protection. Champions winning 6 airports out of 6 with the rulebook edited first. The Rowlatt Act's detention without trial. The National Security Act's preventative detention, no charge, no trial, in force today. Colonial sedition law, a database showing 96% of sedition cases for criticizing politicians came after 2014. Under the old Raj, the top 1%'s share of Indian income peaked around 21%. Today, it is 22.6%. And a man who fights the system with his own body, fasting, explicitly in Gandhi's tradition. His 21-day fast in 2024 deliberately matched Gandhi's longest. Which is why the engineer from the cold open is not a side story. He is the analogy, walking. Sonam Wangchuk is the closest thing modern India has to the inventor it shows its children. The engineer whose school in Ladakh took local pass rates from 5% to 75%. The man who builds artificial glaciers, ice stupas, to give desert villages water. The real-life inspiration behind the most beloved character in Indian cinema in 3 Idiots. Ramon Magsaysay Award 2018. And in February 2021, after Indian and Chinese soldiers had fought at Galwan, he built a portable solar-heated shelter for the Indian Army, plus 15 degrees inside at minus 14 outside, no fuel. And the Defense Secretary praised it publicly. Very timely, absolutely relevant. Then he asked for something. When Article 370 went in 2019, Ladakh became a union territory without a legislature, a region on 2 live borders with no elected assembly of its own. Wangchuk's demand was constitutional inclusion, statehood, and 6th schedule protection for a fragile Himalayan ecology. His methods were hunger strikes in sub-zero cold and a foot march to Delhi. In February 2025, he attended a UN-linked climate conference in Pakistan, a visit the Indian government itself had cleared, where on stage he praised Modi's glacier initiatives. September 24th, 2025, day 15 of his hunger strike.
A protest in Leh turns violent, and police open fire. 4 people are killed, around 90 are injured. It is Ladakh's bloodiest day in decades.
Wangchuk ends his fast that same day and condemns the violence. "Stop this nonsense," he says. "It damages our cause."
That evening, the Home Ministry issues a statement blaming him, alleging his references to the Arab Spring and Nepal's protests incited the mob.
He had made those references. He denies they were incitement, and no court has ever ruled they were. The Violence FIR reportedly did not even name him. What happened next took 72 hours. September 25th, his institute's foreign funding license is canceled, partly over a grant reply about food sovereignty that his wife says the ministry read as a threat to national sovereignty. September 26th, the National Security Act, preventative detention, no charge, no trial, and a flight to Jodhpur Central Jail, 1,000 kilometers from home. Then 5 months and roughly 24 Supreme Court hearings in which his lawyers showed the grounds of detention were served about 28 days late, that 4 of the 5 FIRs cited against him did not name him, that 4 videos cited in the order were never handed over. The government called him the chief provocateur and called his failing health in jail a manufactured and synthetic facade. And then, on March 14, 2026, with the Supreme Court's verdict pending, the government simply revoked the detention. He walked out after roughly 170 days. The court disposed of the case. Nothing left to decide. Hold that. The state jailed him for 6 months without ever charging him with anything, and then released him before a court could say whether that was legal. That is the answer to question 3. What did the engineer do? Nothing a court was ever allowed to examine. Today, he is at Jantar Mantar on hunger strike again. His 6th, this time not even for Ladakh, but for 2.3 million students whose leaked medical entrance exam was canceled in May. Day 18, glucose 67. He says the fast will last 6 weeks, unless, in his words, he dies first. Now stop, because the strongest objection to everything you've just watched deserves to be said at full strength. This is not the British Raj, and in the ways that matter most to a poor family, it is the opposite. The empire drained, this state delivers. 4 crore houses built, tap water from 17% of rural homes to 82, 10 crore cooking gas connections, free grain right now to 800 million people. The World Bank says extreme poverty fell from 16% to around 2%. Economists dispute the yardstick, but the direction is real. The British jailed dissenters and starved provinces. This government feeds its critics' constituencies. And above all, Indians chose it. 3 national elections, no coup, no crown, a mandate. The armed forces answer to civilians so completely that when the government casualized military recruitment in 2022, it was army aspirants who rioted, not generals. Whatever this is, it is not an occupation. And that is exactly where the analogy breaks, twice. And both breaks make escape harder, not easier. Break 1. The old empire was foreign. It had an address, a flag, an accent. You could march to the sea, make salt, and shame a distant parliament, because the extractor and the nation were different things. This architecture is domestic and electoral. It renews itself every 5 years with real votes, real welfare, and, in the disclosed window, a funding system where half of all anonymous corporate money went to one party. Gandhi could demand the British leave. Where exactly would this empire leave to? You cannot decolonize a system that counts your vote and feeds you while it bills you. Break 2. The old empire wrote everything down. Its cruelty is documented. Famine commissions, revenue ledgers. Nauroji indicted it with its own books. This one is engineered not to be auditable. The bonds were anonymous until a court forced them open. The write-offs are accounting entries. The PM's relief fund maintains in court that it is not a public authority under the right to information. The one detention a court was finally about to test was revoked before the verdict. And when Parliament asked about the roughly 700 farmers, the union's list has 702 names who died during the year-long protest against farm laws passed and repealed by voice vote. The government answered, it had, quote, no record. The state that logs 129 billion payment transactions a year had no record of the dead at its own gates. Nauroji had the empire's books. Your generation gets redacted pages. So no,
This is not the old Raj. The old Raj was worse to the body and easier to see. This one is gentler to the body and built to be invisible. It feeds the bottom of the case so it can keep taxing it, and it compounds the top, 12.5% on capital, 0 on inheritance, concentration rising in the government's own receipts every single year since 2021, while 40% of graduates under 25 can't find work, and household savings sit at a 47-year low.
The ladder isn't being pulled up, it is being priced. So what does the weaker side actually do? Watch carefully, because it is already doing the only 3 things that ever worked.
It documents. The electoral bond story wasn't broken by an agency, but by journalists lining up dates after a court forced a bank's hand. It litigates. 5 judges, unanimous, at least put unconstitutional on the record. And it fasts. The oldest Indian technology of descent, a man making his own body the ledger the state refuses to keep.
And notice the machine's countermoves, because they are also the same each time. Cancel the license, open the inquiry, revoke before the ruling, outlast the faster. This is the equilibrium now, not a boot, a billing cycle. If the correction comes, it will not come from morality, it will come from arithmetic. An economy where 877 companies book 2/3 of the profit eventually runs out of customers. You cannot sell SUVs forever to a country that has stopped buying scooters. The two-wheeler graph isn't a grievance, it's the warning light on the machine's own dashboard. In 1947, India threw out an empire it could see. The one it built since is harder to fight because it holds elections, delivers grain, and keeps no records. The golden bird was never freed. The cage was refinanced. The Raj didn't end, it was privatized. As of the day this video went live, the engineer still isn't eating.